I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we complete a 5-day program on forgiveness in a time of duress. Today, we want to conclude by looking at the big picture. So I would like to open our discussion today by bringing in an aspect of forgiveness and reconciliation that we haven't touched on very much over the last 5 days, but which all of us recognize is an essential aspect. If forgiveness is one side of the coin, apology is the other side of the coin. So I would like to reflect for a few minutes on the importance and also the nature of true apology. If you look back over history, it's characterized by almost a universal lack of apology. And most of the apologies that do take place are half-hearted, piecemeal, and done to just simply move the conversation along to other issues. We saw this in the Me Too movement. We've seen it when heads of state apologize, whether it's the Pope for the doctrine of discovery, which wasn't really an apology, or the Australian government to the indigenous people. If you look at the apologies, they're very weak. A real apology, I think, has been described by V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, in her extraordinary book entitled The Apology. And I'd like to reflect on V's notion of apology because I think a strong apology is as important as sincere forgiveness. Those of you who know V's story know that as a young child, she was repeatedly molested sexually by her father. She was emotionally molested and abused. She was occasionally physically in tormented situations. And she went through an extraordinary journey as a result of that. Her father then died without apologizing. And somehow V could not get this out of her mind. It kept irritating her psyche that she knew she needed an apology from her father. And so in an extraordinary series of posthumous conversations with her dad, who was on the other side, but nonetheless real in her psyche and soul, he apologized. And there was a cathartic release for both of them that she recorded in her book. And she makes the following observations about what is required for full, sincere apology. The first is that the one apologizing needs to fully acknowledge what it is that happened and what it is that they did. If you think about it, most of us apologize by saying, well, if there's anything I did to upset you, then I'm apologizing, which if you think about it, puts the onus on the other person to really say, well, no, it wasn't that bad. And, da, 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 da. And so you slide off the anvil. And V saying, no, you got to state, I raped you. I molested you. And it was wrong. And secondly, V says, That acknowledgement only becomes real when it's detailed. Happened on a Saturday night. I slipped you a date rape drug. And you resisted as best you could, but I did it anyway. I'm sorry. So that the acknowledgement, she says, has to be accompanied by a memory, a remembrance in detail of what happened, so that the psyche and soul of the apologizer is made transparent. And then thirdly, what is required is a change of behavior, a change of attitude, a change in the way one comports oneself in the world after the apology. Because faith without works is dead. We can say anything, but unless it's accompanied by real transformation, real change, ultimately it has no meaning. How many men have we seen as a result of the Me Too movement try to just slide away with a mealy-mouthed generic apology for persons unknown and unadmitted? But it's something that they feel they have to do. Corporations do this all the time. They try to get away with a minimum of culpability, even though it's manifestly clear what actually took place. So if we circle back to the theme that I have been developing over the last 5 days, knowing that this is the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. This week is Holocaust Memorial Day. Just imagine if in the aftermath of the Holocaust and the closing of the Second World War that left 50, 60 million people dead, the major religious leaders and political leaders in Europe and in Christianity and in Judaism had have gathered together with all the seriousness with which they gathered politically for the Nuremberg trials. And in conjunction with Nuremberg trials, the Pope had gotten down on his knees before the Jews that were there and said, I apologize for 2,000 years of anti-Semitism. It was wrong. You were persecuted countless times, and Christianity is responsible in part to what was just done to you. And the political leaders, the Germans, but also the Americans, the British, the other leaders who acquiesced while the Holocaust was going on, and all of Europe and the United States apologized for that and provided reparations for the Jews and rehabilitated them in Europe. History would have been completely different. there'd have been no carnage in the Middle East in perpetual war. And there certainly wouldn't have been the genocide that's taking place right now in Gaza. One of the apologies that still needs to be uttered, and Pope Francis came close but couldn't quite do it, is apologizing to all the indigenous peoples for the doctrine of discovery, enunciated in 1492 and 1493, whereby the Pope gave sanction, divine providential blessing to the Europeans as they committed carnage in the Western Hemisphere and in the global South. Just imagine if religious leaders jointly would apologize in the spirit of V's apology, owned it, detailed it, and then engaged in a radical transformation of behavior, the world would change. And the forgiveness that would ensue out of this act of contrition would probably do as much or more to change human consciousness than anything I can think of. And it is our lack, systemic, global lack of acknowledging the power of apology and forgiveness that has developed an increasingly heavy burden on the human psyche, such that we've brought human civilization to the brink of extinction. It's not happening because of something we've done over the last 10 or 50 or 100 years. It's happening because of the accumulation of untreated trauma, which unrecognized perpetuates itself generation upon generation. And now look at our world. So these discussions, my friends, that we've had this week are of inordinate importance at this most precarious time in the human journey, and worthy of us pondering deeply how each of us need to apologize and forgive as a way of life. So thank you, everyone, for joining.